Citizens, we interrupt your normally scheduled programming to bring you an emergency broadcast. This broadcast has been developed to both entertain and educate you in preparedness and survival skills. Please stay tuned. Your very life may depend on it.
Welcome to the first ever episode of Zulu Alpha Podcast. My name is Joe Prim. Virtually sitting right next to me is my man, Myles Francis. Welcome, Myles. Excited to be doing this podcast with you. This is something completely different, something completely new, but yet something that you and I love to do. Talk about survival, talk about preparedness. This is something that we've been doing for a long time. That intro, I hope, blew you guys away and surprised all of you because we want to put a little bit of a twist on something. This niche is getting so old and so dry and so decrepit. I think it's time for at least a spit and polish, whitewash this thing, and let's do something different. Let's do something new, and let's bring some good information, but have a fun time while we're doing it. Myles, awesome to be here with you.
Yeah, Joe, it's pretty awesome to be here. This is something that you and I have both been teasing on our individual social media pages, as well as the new Zulu Alpha Instagram and Facebook for a couple of weeks now. I've been getting all kinds of interesting DMs asking what's going on. Myles, you live in the desert. What's with the hula girl? I often joke I joined the Army, not the Navy, because I get seasick in a bathtub. And here we've got, Hawaiian music and the hula girl in our intro. I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure who we got to do that for us, but they did a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. You kind of have these things in your mind and you get to tease them out. And this is what I love about being creative, and the creative part of this kind of adventure that we're doing on here, this experiment of this podcast is an opportunity to be creative, to do something different, and to have a lot of fun along the way. I've been doing podcasts for quite a long time now. And one of the main things I'm excited about with this podcast is the opportunity to do it with Myles, because one of the hardest parts, if it's not hard enough doing a solo podcast, is doing a solo podcast if you want to have fun or if you want to have some sort of sense of humor, because you get no response. There's no feedback. You don't know what anybody else is thinking. And all that's going on in your mind the whole time is, boy, that was a dud. Boy, that was a dud. That didn't land. So being able to kind of goof around, hang out with Myles, this is going to be a blast.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. You and I have done a couple of podcasts together, and most of them have had a pretty serious tone. But what's kind of funny about the podcast here, Zulu Alpha, that we're putting together is that, a lot of that banter you and I have had off the air, I think is going to really transition really well into a show format. And I think it's going to show all of our listeners a little bit of a different side to you and I in a good way.
Yeah, I think so too. I've often wanted to have this opportunity, so I'm really looking forward to this. This episode is just kind of a teaser, fake episode that we're doing here. In order to get on iTunes, you have to throw something out to them. You got to throw them a bone. And then it takes them a week and a half, something like that, in order to get everything in order so that your podcast will weekly or whenever you release it, get launched onto all of the podcast platforms. So we're throwing this out there kind of as a teaser just to get something on. This is not the real first episode. We'll call this like a preview or the 0.5 episode. So be looking for the real deal coming up in the future, and then we'll get a schedule worked out. Myles and I, this is going to be a little bit of a work in progress about what it exactly entails in every episode, but we will bring the heat. So in this first episode, what we wanted to do was really break down what this podcast is going to be about. We wanted to set a foundation so that we ourselves don't stray away from what we originally planned to do here with this podcast. We see a need for something different. We see a need for something new, and we wanted to be a part of creating a new niche or a new way of looking at the survival preparedness podcast niche. We want to lay down 3 main rules that we are going to abide by with this podcast. And we hope that you dig those rules. If you don't, and you want to stick around and see how they play out and see this experiment, and maybe you think is going to crash and burn, hey, stick around. If we name these 3 rules and this totally rubs you the wrong way, shut off the podcast. That's totally cool with us. This is our show. This is what we think will be the best way to bring knowledge to a new audience, a different audience, a group of people that maybe can't understand what it or go along with the boomer doomer attitude. And that's why we're going to bring something a little bit different here. So I want to clarify, I've been putting in all of my posts and stuff that this is your boomer doomer and gluten-free podcast. That is who we are, and that is what we are going to be. And we are going to have fun, and we are going to be irreverent, and we are going to enjoy the heck out of these podcast episodes. And we hope that you do too. So number 1, what in the world does boomer free mean? See, the boomers have really run this whole preparedness shenanigans and scheme for quite a long time. They've really set the foundation and the tone for what preparedness and what survival is. We want to change all of that because, in my opinion, the doomer mentality is hoarding and very gear centric. It's collect as much beans, bullets, and band-aids as you can and just keep collecting and collecting and collecting. Our approach, Myles and I believe that there is a much better way of working in the survival and preparedness ideal. And that would be a holistic approach. That's an approach that involves us physically, mentally, financially, spiritually, knowledge-wise, and communication-wise. If we've learned anything, those of us that are preparedness-minded and survival-minded and have a mind for situational awareness and stuff, if there's one lesson, because there should be many, but if there's one lesson that we should have learned in the last wars that we have fought in this country, it's that being laden down with water, with food, and with the best top-notch high-tech gear in the world does not necessarily mean you are going to win. And if we look at how the tribal people and the native people fought in those regions that we fought in, I think they might have had some wise ways to their fighting, to the way that they carried themselves and the knowledge that they had of their terrain that gave them a true and distinct advantage. And I think we need to learn from that.
Yeah, Joe, you hit the nail on the head there. And, guys, gals, we're not saying you shouldn't be storing up food and putting back provisions. The problem here is when you think that alone is going to get you out of any hard time, right? When maybe you have the logistical side kind of sort of squared away, but the mindset is not developed. The full gamut of it is not developed. We don't want people to half-ass their preparedness plan, right? So as the great Ron Swanson once said, don't half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing. And there's so many things that we could pick on with this in the preparedness community right now. A big one for me is the physical fitness side of it. Look, I'm not a skinny guy, at 265 pounds. I can, however, deadlift a Toyota Tundra for reps. So, I love it when I see these guys and they're like 400 or 500 pounds and they have, like a 5th wheel packed full of MREs and Mountain House food, but they can't make it up 2 flights of stairs without puffing on their asthma inhaler. It's more than just that gear hoarding. You have to absolutely start developing a systemic approach to this within your family, and some of that's physical fitness, some of that's financial responsibility, some of that's developing mental toughness and spiritual steadiness, and of course knowledge communication. Joe, how many guys do you know they show you their bug out bag and they pull out their Bofeng ping pong jing jong radio and it's not programmed. They don't know anything about using that radio. They don't understand its limitations because they've never gotten the education on the equipment. Or they'll have, a $5,000 rifle with a loopholed optic, but have never zeroed the gun or never actually taken the gun and their associated chest rig, et cetera, and put it through a class, put it through some real world training. Having a stack of cool guy shit is not the answer.
And the good news is that so much of this, a more holistic approach, is a lot cheaper. You can go out in your backyard and do hard things and learn to have a better mindset. You can go next door and build a relationships and start to build rapport with your neighbor and work on your communication skills and work on building something in your neighborhood of a group of people that can rely on one another. Because as we get into the next part of this, is the doomer part, we'll expound on that too a little bit more. But you hit the nail on the head there. It's not that these things are inherently bad. They're only a small piece of the puzzle. And if you don't put the whole puzzle together, you will be found lacking. And like I said, the smarter you can be, the wiser you can be with your plan, as Myles mentioned, the better off you will be moving forward. And that mentality of just collecting up and hoarding as much as you possibly can, I think in the long run, it's very, very hurtful. So boomer free. Let's jump into number 2, doomer free. The doomer mentality is fear-based. And I have done a lot of studying on fear. I've read a lot of books on fear. It's a topic that really interests me. Fear is always bad. Fear makes doing any sort of action difficult, and it makes decision-making almost impossible. Their attitude is that the end of the world as we know it is coming. My and Myles' view is that we once again need to take a more holistic approach. We prepare ourselves the best that we can, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, provisionally, relationally, not for the end of the world as we all as human beings or we all as Americans know it, but the end of the world as you know it. And that is a distinct difference for me. One is hoarding and grabbing everything to be the king of your own domain when everything ends and everything turns to complete chaos. Myles and I's viewpoint is that you need to be gearing yourself up holistically so that when the end of the world as you know it comes. And what do I mean by the end of the world as you know it? I mean an accident, a loss of a job, a natural disaster, a bad diagnosis from a recent doctor visit. These things can happen to any of us at any given time, and our lives change in the blink of a moment. Or our lives change in the blink of an eye, not in the blink of a moment, because moments don't usually blink. But if they did, that saying would have made sense.
Yeah, and if I could jump in here, Joe, you know, both of us are men of God. I'm rough around the edges. I cuss. I drink sometimes, but we're both men of God, and no one is perfect. But at the end of the day here, God never wanted us to live in fear. God gave us discernment. We can certainly discern the times around us. That may be a great episode in the future is the Bible and preparedness. God certainly gave us the ability to see the times around us, discern the events around us, and act on that. But that's not the same thing as living completely in fear. And yeah, you know, it's fun to sit here and it's sexy and it's cool to joke about, you know, not joke, make light of, you know, some insane apocalyptic event. Oh, I'm preparing for a pole shift. I'm preparing for a coronal mass ejection. I'm sure you remember the show Doomsday Preppers and how ridiculous that show was. And they always had this like crazy, I'm preparing for global warming to melt the poles and sink us into we're all going to drown because we live on the coast. It was always some like really far off extreme thing, right? But yeah, I mean, on a personal note, I blew my knee up at work last year, and had it not been for having a little bit of extra food and being financially responsible and having some savings put away and living frugally and well within my means, that could have really been a much harder thing to move through financially.
Yeah. And I think it's a mindset shift, Myles. It's a mindset shift. Instead of this fear of everything that we've known, the whole world coming to an end, and what are we going to do, and how do we react, and how do you prepare for something for that? And the problem with that idea, again, is that it's such a huge problem, Myles, that realistically, what can you do? Nothing. And people get paralyzed and get fearful, and they start to make bad decisions, and they buy stupid things, and they put their energy and efforts into things that produce very little. Where if you are always, as I said in the beginning of this, preparing yourself to be your best in as many ways as you possibly can with that holistic approach, you're prepared for any number of things, if not everything, the best that you can be prepared for it. Because realistically, that's all we can do. But I think that mindset shift of stopping worrying about the world as we all know it, and only the world worrying about the end of the world as we ourselves know it, changes everything. What you're going to buy, how much you're going to keep of, whether it be water or money, or how are you going to keep all your different money. There's different ways of thinking about things when what you're preparing for is a bad phone call or a car accident.
Yeah. Again, any little hiccup in your life that can cause chaos to your family. The company I used to fly for, the week of Christmas, closed 3 bases across Arizona. Nurses, paramedics, pilots, essentially out of a job, many of which that have been working at these helicopter bases for 10 plus years, overnight, hardly any notice. Now, the WARN Act, they got paid for, I think 45 days is what the WARN Act requires. And they did offer them positions within the company. But what if you can't just relocate and say, hey, I guess I'm going to be a flight paramedic in Florida now? You have to be prepared. And looking at proper mindset and proper prioritization really is going to be your answer there. If you're a professional, are you maintaining your professional certification and licensing? Are you taking opportunities to expand that so that number one, you could advance in your career and make more money? But also, if something happened and you had to make a change in your life, are you setting yourself up for success? Are you putting some...
How are your relationships with other people in the business? How are your connections? When people went here or went over there, did you keep in touch with them? All those things are part of communication and a part of setting yourself up to succeed.
Yeah. Are you living within your means, or are you being foolish with the money that you're given at work? And I'm not saying you can't enjoy yourself, but, go listen to Dave Ramsey. He's been around as long as he's been for a reason. And like I said, had it not been for an emergency fund and, driving a paid off car and buying a house that was comfortably affordable, that injury could have absolutely financially destroyed me, being out of work for over a month and then hours cut basically in half for months after that with rehab and retraining that knee.
And then number 3, last but not least, gluten-free. Now, what in the world do I mean by gluten-free? And that is this. We need to laugh. We need to enjoy life. We need to be having fun, and we need to put a focus on being intentional about that attitude. I truly believe, and we all know, that we right now at this moment are left of bang. And again, we go back to the last idea. And for those that don't understand or haven't heard the term left of bang, that's like if you're looking at a timeline and you look at the timeline and something bad happens is on that timeline. As long as you're on the left-hand side of that, you're good, right? The bad thing hasn't happened yet. But when you're on the right side of bang, that means something has happened and you must know how to react, or you will get thrown into a much worse situation than if you are ready. So all of us, all of the time, are either just on the right side right in the middle of that bang or on the left side. Most of us listening to this podcast right now are probably somewhere on the left side. That's usually where we as human beings end up hanging out. But we don't know where that bang is. We don't know where that bad thing that's going to happen is. But the bang is inevitable. Like Thanos said, I am inevitable, as he snapped his fingers. That bang is going to be there. When it happens, what it's going to be, we don't know. A lot of people out there with a lot of crazy predictions. But the funny thing about all their predictions, Myles, is they've been making those predictions for the last 25 years.
You know, Joe, we're fairly close in age here. You probably remember one or two things from when I was a really little kid, but I made it through Y2K. I made it through 9/11. I made it through the 2008 housing bubble bust. I made it through the so-called Mayan end of the world 2012. I made a lot of money selling survival gear. I made it through that. I made it through, 8 years of Obama. Look, you're absolutely correct. And this does kind of circle back a bit to that doomer mentality. How do you want to live your life, guys? Do you want to live under a rock? Do you want to live in your missile silo, cleaning your Mosin Nagant with a toothbrush, eating Spam out of a can? Or do you want to take this time that we do have to enjoy your children and your partner and your friends? Do you want to take this time to possibly minister in your church or in your community? Do you want to take this time to step up and be a leader, whether that's in your church, in your community, even in your workforce? It's really up to you. You can either sit here and you can keep your head in the sand and allow yourself to be paralyzed with fear, or Joe's right. You can realize that whether it's a job loss or a comet full of rabid bats, the end is coming. We know that, right? Joe and I, we've read the book, we've read the last chapter. We know we win in the last chapter, but it's coming. So what's it going to be? Are you going to avoid going to the movies with your wife and your kids? Are you going to cancel that cookout with your men's group from your church? Or are you going to really embrace living?
Yeah, it's just when you break it down like that, it's foolish not to enjoy our time on that side of the bang. And, each time I go to a rodeo or go to the movie with my kids, I often think about the fact that this might be the last time for this moment, because it could be for any number of reasons why. But that moment, and either we can be upset and be frustrated that it could be the last, or we can enjoy the heck out of it. And that's really what we want to do with this podcast, is make something fun, make something enjoyable, do some teaching. Myles knows an incredible amount of just dirt medicine. He knows how to just patch people up that have had their hands, arms, legs, or heads chopped off, and he can put them right back together again with just a little bit of duct tape. And so Myles is cracking up over here. Wasn't quite sure I was going to introduce him like that, but he can do it. He can do it. And in that part in Dumb and Dumber where they had the head taped back on the parakeet, if that had been Myles there.
That was one of the best. First of all, that's like my favorite movie. That and Office Space. Those are two movies that, like, when my dad and I want to have a guys' night, grill up some hot dogs, cold sodas in one of those two movies. But I just love that line when he's like, their life is falling apart. We don't have a job. Our gas has got turned off. All right, birds' heads are falling off. It's just like that moment of desperation. Again, that was like the end of the world for them. Their bird's head fell off.
If Myles had been there, it would have been a whole different movie. That's just all I'm saying right now. So we bring a lot of knowledge, or I should say Myles brings a lot of knowledge, and we want to bring that knowledge, but alongside with some humor and to be able to laugh and joke, at that blind kid who was holding that parakeet and going, "Hey, pretty bird, you're so quiet, pretty bird."
with like 4 rolls of scotch tape around his neck.
If you don't know what we're talking about, look it up on YouTube. You will crack up too. So we'll just do a quick bio here. For those that don't know me, like Myles says, I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I authored a book called Open, 6 Life-Changing Principles. I've been doing podcasting for the last few years, did a podcast, Ever Vigilant, which ended up getting morphed into Heroes Wanted, which I'm on hiatus from right now. In fact, to do this, I'm a coach on the side, a mindset coach, really specializing in helping fathers get their heads out of their butts and find out where they want to go, because there are a lot of fathers that are just stuck. They've gone through the motions. They've done checked all the check boxes that you're supposed to do as a dad, as a good man in this country. And they get to the end of that checklist and they have no idea what to do with themselves. And that's where I come in, help you find out what your passions are, your goals, where you want to go, and help you sort and organize that stuff. So that's what I do with coaching. And now, almost 3 years now, I'm a Texan. So I'm going to put that in my bio from now on, that I am a Texan, because I love it here. I'm so glad that we moved down here. I only wish that we had done it sooner. So I've been in construction for 25 years. That's my trade. 3rd generation carpenter. That's what my family has done for a very, very long time. I worked my way up from humping lumber around, building houses, to now being a superintendent for a commercial general contractor. And that's what I do. Obviously, this stuff's more my passion, but that's what I do. That's my jam. That's what I know. That is what I've been doing for a long time. Down here in Texas, we got 5 acres. We had a little homestead down up in Illinois when we were up there, with goats and geese and ducks and chickens and dogs and cats and probably some other things that I'm forgetting right now, because when you actually have a piece of property and you start getting animals, it really doesn't matter. You just start collecting them up. So right now we're down in Texas. We live on 5 acres. We just got 2 goats, and we got some chickens and some guineas, and just recently got some ducks too. So we're excited. You'll hear more about the homestead and all of our experiences as we move forward. But this is something that we've been doing for a while. I also am certified in permaculture. And that's I love that regenerative idea of agriculture and building off of the land. Really, I think the way that God intended us to do. So I love doing creative works like this. And like I said, and I'll say it again and again and again, and probably when we get into episodes way down the line, I'll be saying I'm happy to do this again, because when you start doing something creative, and when you start giving away, and when you start getting outside of your comfort zone, and when you start pushing yourself to do different things, you have opportunities open up to you that you never would have dreamed about in the past. When I started Ever Vigilant, which really is a podcast, is just a fart in the wind, right? It was nothing. Very few people ever heard of it. Even less people listened to it, and even less people listened to it consistently, and even less people shared it. But out of that experience of doing that podcast, I got to meet guys like Myles. And now fast forward the clock all the way to where we are today. And as our friendship has grown stronger over the years, and we've worked together on different projects, here we are working on something. That's why I always tell guys, go out and do something. I don't care what it is. Expand yourself starting today.
All right. Well, that's a hell of an intro to follow there. So my name is Myles. I am an amateur bird head reattaching specialist. I kid. So Myles Francis, I've been a friend of yours, Joe, for 5 years, something like that. I remember coming on one of your earlier Ever Vigilant podcasts where we talked about like how to build an IFAC, and then we were on a whole bunch of other odds and ends shows throughout the years together as well. But it's a little bit about my background. I'm a combat veteran. I served in the Army. I am a critical care flight paramedic. Although I have stepped down from that, I am now working for a pharmaceuticals and biologicals company, which is pretty cool. Get paid a lot more money to do a whole lot less work with a lot less responsibility, better schedule. But I have a pretty diverse background in EMS, from military and tactical medicine to independent practice, paramedicine, working in remote settings, to working in hospitals, ER, ICU, pediatrics, to primary practice, to ambulance, helicopter, you name it. I've pretty much spanned the entire gamut as a paramedic. I also own a small business. I manufacture trauma kits. I sell individual supplies. We also do training. If you've been following myself and Joe for any amount of time, you're probably pretty familiar with the company Archangel Dynamics already. Let's see what else. I am a personal trainer. I'm a nutrition coach. Do that on the side. I am divorced. I'm a single father of 2 pretty awesome kids. Really awesome kids, very sweet, very bright young kids. And used to have a little homestead myself, lived on just shy of 4 acres north of Prescott. And then as the result of a schmishmorsh, I had to sell all that and move back down to Tucson. But that's another topic for another day. Down in Tucson with my family now, enjoying the desert again, enjoying loosely. Now, the desert's a pretty cool place to live. I'm sure we're going to do an episode on desert survival tips or something. Both Joe and I are all pros on that. So, yeah, that's really about it. Getting ready to go back to grad school and launch another business venture that I is not ready to announce yet. And then here we are on Zulu Alpha, getting ready to change the world in survival podcasting for the better.
You know it. I'm looking forward to this. Guys, stay tuned. Follow us on Instagram at Zulu Alpha Actual. And you can follow Myles at @Snake Doctor. They might have to change that to Bird Doctor. And you can also follow me at Prepare.Defend.Lead. So this will evolve. This is going to play around. We want you guys to get involved as well. If there are topics or things that you have questions about or want to learn more about that we can help you out, let us know. Down the line, we will probably be doing a nutrition segment, or Myles will be doing some sort of nutrition segment each episode. I'll be doing something on mindset each episode. We're going to fill this with good knowledge in areas where we have experience. And number 2, we're going to have a lot of fun doing top 10 lists and top 5 lists. We will comment on what's going on in the world around us, because at times I'm just fit to be tied. I need to share my thoughts on what's going on in this crazy world that we know too much about. Back in the old days where you lived in your little tribe or village, and that was only gossip that you had to worry about. It's way different than what we're experiencing now, kind of information overload. So we'll dive into that kind of stuff, but we want to keep this focus mainly on preparedness and survival and all the things that fall under that. So Myles, I'll let you knock this thing out of the park, and we'll finish off this episode.
All right. So we'll go ahead and start with, yes, there is a story behind Snake Doctor. That will be covered in a upcoming Patreon behind the scenes. But guys, gals, thank you so much for listening. This is something Joe and I have been kind of chewing on for quite a while. And we just kind of, as Joe said, we wanted to really kind of explain with this little short teaser episode, who the heck is Joe Prim and Myles Francis? What's our background? What's our authority to speak on anything preparedness related? Although honestly, until I can go to the U of A and get a PhD in prepping, are any of us really experts? We're just sharing our life experiences, right? But we wanted to lay that out there. We wanted to also kind of talk about the purpose of the show. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. And, full disclaimer, guys, it's going to be off the cuff. It might be a little bit rough around the edges. We might say some no words every now and then. If iTunes doesn't give us an explicit label, maybe they will, who knows? But we look forward to interacting with all of you guys. We're very responsive with social media. There's a lot more in the works. I'm not going to tease just yet. But there's really cool things coming, and I'm very excited to see where this river ends up going.
You know it. As always, guys, thanks for listening, and follow what's going on so you can find out when that first full episode drops. We're out.